I have noticed the following thing in traversing across lines that maybe I wouldn't be expected to traverse across. When one thinks independently, one ends up building kind of a personal epistemology. And that personal epistemology comes with terms that will have been either invented or will have been redefined so that they are sharper. And what tends to be true of people who have generated such an epistemology is that they will very frequently forget that they've done it. In other words, they will create this way of understanding the world that is self consistent, and it will sound like it is deliverable in the common language, English in my case. But if you take two such people and you put them together and you say, okay, now talk about what's true, they will very frequently run afoul of their personal redefinition of the world for self consistency because they won't realize that the other person has done it also. And the other person will simply sound wrong to them. So the way to get around this is to spend time, and I think it's completely unavoidable, it is necessary. When you are dealing with people who have thought independently for sufficiently long to have their own worldview, you have to spend, it's often weeks, learning to hear the other person as they are actually intending to be heard and teaching them to hear you the same way, right? So there's this process of saying, okay, when I say the word sympathy, this is actually what I mean, right? I don't mean what people typically mean. And when you get past that, what you typically discover is that, you have the most fascinating puzzle imaginable, which is you have all of these minds which are, you know, constrained by the perceptual and cognitive tools that each of us have, which are highly idiosyncratic in many ways. And they're also limited to whatever experiences we have had in the world. Our own personal histories dramatically affect what we think is true. And then we have this marvelous tool of language that allows us to compare notes. But in order to compare notes, you sort of need to build the Rosetta Stone for each conversation. And that's not a process that can be quick. Right? To the extent that these worldviews are deep, that process is slow. Once you get there, though, and you sort of have extended sufficient trust for somebody else to compel you of their little glossary so that you can understand them as they need to be understood, there is a tremendous benefit to be had in teaming up. Now, the problem, the fly in the ointment of all of this, is that it is contingent on the fact that you are in a good faith environment. Right? So if everybody in the room is extending to others a sense that what you believe is sure to be self-consistent or sure to be largely self-consistent, and that there is benefit in trading worldviews and then seeing if anything new emerges, that's great. But you can't do it in any old room where somebody may be there, selling something or whatever they might be doing.
Right.
All right. So the question then is, if A, does that model dovetail with what you've experienced? And B, if so, what does it imply about the project that you're suggesting?
It does dovetail with what I've experienced. It takes time to figure out, first of all, what do we have enough in common that we can start from a place of trust before diving into difference. But I must tell you that I'm not as hung up about the need for patience as maybe what you've suggested. Here's why. My many years of walking this complicated earth tells me that every single one of us is more than meets the eye. We are, as I say, and don't label me, the only label that I can stand by that captures all of us is the label plural. We are all plurals. And let me bounce this off of you. If we got into the habit, Brett, of entering into potentially contentious conversations, conversations in which we know there's going to be disagreement, But we started it off by saying, look, we don't know much about each other. We probably only really know that we disagree on X issue. But the one thing that I can count on, I would say to you, Bret, is that you are so much more than what I think I know about you. So am I. I'm so much more than what you assume about me. And can we agree, therefore, that in this conversation, I'm not going to judge you or judge the totality of who you are based on your position on this particular issue? And could you extend to me the same courtesy? If we established a ground rule like that, first of all, is that too idealistic? Is that a habit we can actually get into in order to begin making, making a conversation more constructive than it might otherwise be?
So it's funny. I had almost forgot to mention it. There is a small community of people, I don't even exactly know what its boundaries are, but that was united by our friendship with Mike Brown. Mike Brown used to hold a gathering he called Science Camp, where he would bring scientists to a particular island, and we would talk to each other about what we thought was true, doing exactly the sort of thing you and I are describing here. And there was a thing that we had called Double Island Rule. The Double Island Rule, because we were meeting on Double Island, was that when somebody says something that sounds stupid, you know they wouldn't be in the conversation if they were stupid. Therefore, you are obligated to imagine that what they have said makes sense relative to some framework, and you're obligated to look for it, right? Leaping to the conclusion that because somebody has said something preposterous, that they are obviously not making sense wouldn't be a reasonable thing to do in that context. Now, you can't apply this rule just any old place, right? Lots of people say lots of stupid stuff. But in the context where you have curated the discussion so that everybody there knows what sense sounds like, at the point people stop making sense, there's typically a reason for it. And very frequently it comes down to one of these glossary comparisons or something like that. So I love your approach to this, which is, all wise people recognize that that I might be the central player in my story, but that you are surely the central player in your story.
Right.
And therefore, I need to correct the discussion for the fact that if each participant is having that experience, that, and this is someplace very important to me, we are actually having a conversation that exists between us. The important thing about this conversation is not what happened in your head. That could go on to be important. You could go on to do something with it. Likewise, I could go on to do something with it. But the primary import of this conversation is that you and I have created an emergent space between us in which we have reached an understanding, right? And it contains pieces of what I think and pieces of what you think. And it seems to be hanging together in the middle in the sense that we seem to agree on important things that are enlightening in their own right. And it's very hard, I think, to create a desire to do that for people who have too frequently been rewarded for, let's say, zero-sum competition in discussion, where typically they feel good if they score points in a discussion, or if they get lots of kudos for having one-upped somebody.
Right.
But if your experience is that actually if I just simply have faith that there is an emergent feature to this conversation, and I work to enhance the emergent part of the conversation, that it tends to be good for me in ways that I can't even put my finger on, so I don't need to worry about it.
Well, and I think that it tends to be good in a way that I can, and I think most people, if they think about it this way, would easily be able to put their finger on, which is this. Look, if you want to be heard, whatever your message, the surest way, the most reliable way to get a fair hearing is to give one first. not because there's any magic in that, but because there is a biological process here where, Bret, if I am asking you sincere questions about where you're coming from, and I'm listening to understand, not to win, because there's no need to turn a perfectly good discussion into a debate. And I continue to ask you authentic questions from a place of curiosity and not judgment. Whatever emotional defenses you may have walked into the conversation with because you knew that we disagreed on something, hence the high emotional defenses, now your emotional defenses can lower. And that in turn means that the clatter and the clutter in your head of wanting to poke holes in whatever argument I'm about to make can, at the very least, diminish. And you'll have more space to hear where I'm coming from, exactly because I've given you the space to be heard. Again, I'm not saying that, every conversation is going to go swimmingly as a result, but I will tell you, I'm the co-executive producer of a documentary coming out soon about a young woman, one of my mentees from NYU, who advocated changing the Mississippi state flag, particularly the Confederate battle emblem in that flag. And, her movement won this long-standing goal just a few months ago. But in the process, she launched an incendiary protest and, of course, received a ton of hate for it. And then she decided she's going to try something different. And she tried exactly what you and I have just described. And she sat down with not just a supporter of the Confederate flag, but somebody who belongs to the Sons of Confederate Veterans, okay? And she started by asking him a genuine question, heartfelt. How does that flag make you feel? So not a brain buster, not gotcha, just how does it make you feel? And he replied, makes me feel at home. He asked her, how does it make you feel? And she said, like I'm not at home, even though I am. And the conversation got underway in earnest. And during that time, the flag supporter, Lewis is his name, realized something. He realized that he actually cared more about Genesis than he did about the flag itself. And afterwards, I asked him, what the hell, man? Like, how did that happen? And he said, honestly, I've just never experienced respect from anybody on the other side like I did today. It is that simple. Not saying that it's easy to show respect to somebody with whom you profoundly disagree on something that you're passionate about, but when you do offer it, it's amazing what can happen. And for those who assume I have nothing to say to somebody who must obviously be a racist, let me tell you, not in that conversation, not after that conversation, but about 10 months later, Lewis, through his own volition, pulled down the Confederate flag that was flying in his backyard, neatly folded it up, and put it in a box called Things of the Past. And between that conversation and that moment, he not only joined the New Flag movement, but this is so beautifully, deliciously Mississippi, he became a mentor to the leaders of the movement, teaching them how to protect themselves with guns, how to work a gun, how to clean a gun, how to maintain it, how to get it registered. He was their guru. And let me tell you, that gave them the peace of mind to go boldly forth.
That is a beautiful story. It is a really beautiful story, and it resonates for so many different reasons. And the Confederate flag is the perfect thing to be at the heart of that story, because anybody who has engaged Southerners who favor that flag knows that it is not simply, and in general, it's not even flown by people proudly as an assertion of racial dominance.
That's right.
It is flown as a symbol of Southern identity for certain people,
Yeah.
right?
Heritage.
Heritage. Now, those of us who, from the North or Black or whatever, rightly understand that flag as a threat, right, to something important. And so you can just see how the conversation bogs down in the assumption of what the other must be thinking.
And the key word there, assumption.
Right, the assumption. Right. And so the other thing that I would say is, I have not lived that story over the Confederate flag, but I have lived many analogs of this story where there is somebody I'm not supposed to be able to talk to, and something in me that I think others would regard as perverse finds that challenge irresistible, right? I love to talk to such people. And when I do, it's not every time, but it's certainly the majority of times. It is readily possible to cross that bridge. It is frequently delightful what you find on the other side. It's not typically enlightened. They may not feel that I am enlightened. But the discovery of the humanity on the other side of a bridge that's supposed to be uncrossable is so rewarding, right? It is so reifying of the sense of humanity and possibility and optimism and all of those things that I swear to you, it's addictive. And I know I'm talking to somebody who must feel that same thing.
I do.
And if only, I've said it in various ways. I've said that doing away with your own bigotry is like giving yourself a huge raise. Right? You don't know what cost you're paying walking around the world with bigotry. It's costing you every hour of every day in ways you don't have any idea about until you get rid of it. And when you get rid of it, you'll discover people are more interesting, they're more fun, they're more surprising, and it really is like some giant raise that just makes you freer than you were before.
Life becomes an adventure.
It does. Yep. And if people understood that, like, if you could give yourself a raise, a monetary raise, would you do it? Of course you would, right? If you could give yourself a raise that just didn't happen to pay in money, but it paid in something else that's more valuable, would you do that? Of course you would. Well, here's one, to the extent that you have bigotry, right? Just cancel it. Just try it out. Try it out for a week, right? Yeah. See if you're not a happier person. See if you don't feel smarter, frankly. Right? Because these biases, they don't help you think clearly, right?
So true.
They're about
in
some
fact, they
battle.
Prevent you from thinking.
Right.
From actually thinking.
That is exactly right. That's a lovely story. What is the name of the documentary?
It's called Mississippi Turning.
Oh, good one.
And, some people may think that as a result of the new flag and all that it implies that, Mississippi is turning as in spoiling, right? And other people will see Mississippi turning for the better. So either way, we've got ourselves covered.
Love it. It's a deep play on words. And did I glean that the protagonist or one of the protagonists of your story, her name was Genesis?
Genesis, yes.
Genesis. Yep. All right. Well, that's interesting too. Okay. That's fantastic. I look forward to this documentary. Maybe it will succeed in making the point to many about what might be on the other side, and we can stop this nonsense of accusing people of being deplorable or
right.
Whatever it is that people somehow imagine. It's hard to, once you stop doing that, it's hard to even understand what is in people's minds about it.